Pack your bags, loser. Derek says it into his champagne like a joke. Glasses clink. Laughter pops like bubble wrap. I freeze. It is my dad's 70th birthday. Candles glow on a cake I baked at 3 a.m. Patricia leans in with that trained nurse smile. Be reasonable. People his age should not be running their own affairs. The room goes quiet. My chest burns. Anyone who claims turning 70 means you hand over your life has lost the plot. I push my chair back. The fork rattles. I step out to the porch because the air inside has teeth. My hands shake. I dial the only number that matters. Michael, it is happening now. He does not ask what. He already knows. I am on my way, he says. I end the call and stare at the cold blue sky. This was the moment I planned for. 6 months of doubt. 6 months of collecting receipts. 6 months of smiling through thin ice. I am Amanda. 32, youngest daughter of Harold. 5 years ago, I left a corner office and a city view to sleep in my childhood bedroom with a fan that hums like a lullaby. Mom died, and grief bent my father into a quieter shape. I stayed because no one else would. I learned his meds by heart. I labeled every bottle. I kept the house breathing. In the mornings, I pressed coffee into his hands. At night, I walked the halls and listened for the small sounds that mean trouble. Keys on the counter, water running, a door left open to the dark. Derek is 40 and wears success like a custom suit. CFO, vacation photos in Greece, smiles for investors, smirks for me. Lauren is 38 and busy being busy. Good people on paper, absent in practice. They call twice a month and send thoughts and prayers. Then Patricia arrived with red lipstick and a timeline that moved too fast. She cooked for Dad. She praised Derek. She looked at the framed photos like they were clutter. Then came talk about the house, property taxes, stairs, safety. Words that sound loving when you do not listen too hard. Inside the living room, the party tries to restart. I can hear it through the door. Someone plays host. Someone asks for ice. Dad laughs his tired laugh. I picture the photo wall I built from the attic boxes. 70 years lined up like mile markers. The Yellowstone trip. Mom in a white dress at the county courthouse. My first day of school with a crooked backpack. Memories you cannot list on a deed. The kind people forget when they taste money. I step back in. Faces turn. Derek taps his glass with a spoon. He loves the sound of control. A toast, he says, to a new chapter. Patricia touches Dad's shoulder like she owns it. I look at my father. His eyes are foggy tonight. That is not age. That is chemistry. I know the difference. I have watched it rise and fall with her special tea. The thought makes my breath come fast. The plan in my head snaps into place like a seatbelt. I take Dad's hand. I will be right here, I whisper. Then I meet Derek's eyes and smile in a way that is not a smile. Let them think 70 means surrender. Let them say it out loud. The camera of the night is rolling. The truth is patient. The truth likes an audience. If you are watching this video, drop a comment and tell me where you are from. Hit that like button and subscribe to follow me through this wild family drama. Before the toast and the fake smiles, there was Chicago. A corner office with glass walls. A badge that unlocked floors my parents never saw. A boyfriend who talked in road maps and product sprints. Ryan said we were on track for a condo by the lake. Then Derek called and said Dad was skipping meals and losing weight. He said the house smelled like dust and old coffee. He said someone needed to step in. Someone meant me. I flew home for a long weekend and found Post-it notes on the microwave that said, dinner and eat. I found a stack of unpaid bills, paper clipped together like a cry for help. Dad tried to make a joke of it. Your mother handled the little things. I handled the bridges. Now the little things are winning. That night, I lay in my old bed and listened to the pipes click. In the morning, I called my boss and asked for leave. Ryan stared at me like I had spoken in a dead language. You cannot let a retired man run your life. He is 70. He needs structure. We need momentum. I told him love is not a quarterly target. He said I was making a mistake. I packed my suitcase anyway. The first month was a mess and a miracle. I built a med chart on the fridge. I set alarms for pills and meals. I labeled drawers for socks and spoons. I made a binder with insurance cards and appointment slips. I put fresh batteries in the smoke detectors and found the loose stair that had tripped us all as kids. Sometimes Dad forgot the sentence he was saying. Sometimes he forgot he had eaten. I learned to meet him where he was. Slow mornings, short walks, a deck of cards after dinner. It helped. The fog in his eyes thinned when the days had shape. Derek and Lauren visited once and called twice a month. They were polite about it. Derek sent an article about top-tier facilities and said independence is a luxury at his age. Lauren said stability matters more than pride. People say things like that as if dignity is optional after a certain birthday. I bit my tongue and kept the house breathing. Uncle Walter started calling every Sunday night. He told me to keep notes. Times, dates, names. Not because we were suspicious, but because memory is a tricky business when grief sits in the room. He said get Dad's wishes on paper while he is clear. Not rushed, not cornered. I scheduled an appointment with a neutral attorney, and we wrote down simple things. Keep me at home if possible. Use in-home care before facilities. Let Amanda manage the daily stuff, but do not shut out the others. It was not perfect. It was honest. 2 years later, Dad met Patricia at a clinic visit. She had a name tag and quick hands and a way of touching a shoulder, like she was turning down a dial. She asked about his sleep and blood pressure and smiled at me like a colleague. I wanted to like her. I tried. She brought soup on a cold day and said the house must be hard to maintain. She said stairs are a risk at his age. She said families should not cling to square footage when safety is at stake. People dress control in concern and hope you do not notice the switch. I noticed. I did not say it out loud. The first time I felt the floor tilt was in the parking lot. Patricia walked us out and looked past us at the neighborhood map mounted by the door. She traced a finger along our street. 4-bedroom colonial. Good bones. Prime lot. She said it softly like she was thinking to herself. Then she smiled and handed Dad a flyer for a senior center. Maybe a slip. Maybe nothing. But later that night, I found her business card on the counter. On the back was a neat note in blue ink. See you Thursday. And beneath it, a phone number I knew by heart. It was Derek's. I kept the card. I did not call the number. I wanted to see what Thursday meant without tipping my hand. All week, Patricia hovered like a cheerful storm front. She brought sugar-free cookies. She folded laundry that was already folded. She told Dad to rest more. She praised Derek for being proactive. She used the word proactive like it was a cure. I watched her hands when she poured tea. I watched the clock after he drank it. His eyelids grew heavy. His voice thinned. He forgot where we put the deck of cards. I wrote it all down in my notebook. On Thursday, I took Dad to physical therapy. We were home 15 minutes early because he felt tired. I opened the front door and froze. Derek was at the kitchen table with Patricia. Papers were spread out like a glossy fan. When they saw us, they moved fast. Folders snapped shut. Smiles snapped on. Derek said the word insurance. Patricia said options. I saw a corner of a brochure with a rooftop pool and a logo I did not know. It was not a hospital logo. It was a real estate logo. After Derek left, Patricia leaned on the counter and made her voice soft. Adults our father's age should not have to carry the stress of decisions. She said it like mercy. It sounded like a cage. I said, Dad makes his own choices on clear days. She said, clear days are rare after 70. I told her age is not a switch. She laughed and changed the subject. Later, I found 3 family photos face down on the piano. She said she had been dusting. The frames felt clean. Derek started calling more. He used numbers that sound neutral but feel like a shove. Property tax, deferred maintenance, market timing. He said we should maximize value while Dad can still benefit. He said strong leadership means hard calls. He said my attachment to the house was sentimental and young. Lauren joined in by text. She said safety comes first. She said I was too close to see the big picture. People talk like that when they want your yes to come dressed as wisdom. I doubled down on the routine. I kept meals steady and walked short. I moved the med box to a high shelf and kept a second set in my room. When Patricia asked why I changed the system, I said we were trying a new flow. She did not argue. She brought a new tea with a label that promised deep rest. The nights grew quiet in the wrong way. Dad slept through his favorite show. He missed the punchline on a joke he always tells. He woke up confused about the day. I started brewing coffee after dinner and watched the fog lift. It lifted fast when she was late. It lingered when she served him her cup on time. Uncle Walter told me to trust the log. He said patterns do not lie. He said the first person to say the word facility usually has a spreadsheet in their pocket. I laughed and then stopped laughing because he was right. Patricia invited a friend to stop by on Saturday. She called him a consultant. He wore a sharp suit and shoes that did not squeak. He shook Dad's hand and looked at the crown molding. He talked about aging in place like it was a product. He said many families regret waiting. He said control should migrate downward to the capable tier. I felt the heat rise in my face. The idea that a birthday can demote a person to cargo is a scam with paperwork. That night, I cleaned the kitchen and found a folder under the bread box. It was a booklet for a senior living complex with a golf simulator and a wine club. A sticky note on the cover said, Meeting Tuesday. In the margin, I recognized Derek's handwriting. He had circled expedited move-in. Under it, he wrote one word. Sell. I started with the tea. I labeled our mugs with a marker like a camp counselor. I brewed Dad's from a sealed box I bought myself. I set a timer on my phone. I watched how long it took for his eyes to dim. On nights when Patricia poured for him, the fog rolled in 20 minutes later. On nights when I poured for him, the fog did not come. I wrote it all down in my log. Time, brand, color, mood. People love to say drowsy equals elderly. No, drowsy equals chemistry until proven otherwise. The pills came next. I knew the shapes by heart. One blue oval for blood pressure, one small white round for arthritis, one tan capsule for cholesterol. One evening, I opened the organizer and felt a wrong note in my bones. The blue oval was a different shade. The white round had no imprint. I took a photo with a quarter next to them. I put those 2 tablets in a zip bag. I drove to a pharmacist friend after dinner. He looked, and then he looked again. That is a sedative. Not on your father's list. That dose would blur anyone. He said it like a weather report. I thanked him and sat in my car until my hands stopped shaking. I bought a second med box. I marked it with a dot inside the hinge where only I could see it. I filled that box myself and kept it in my dresser behind the sweaters. The pantry box stayed on the kitchen shelf for display. I watched who reached for which. Patricia always reached for the kitchen box. She called it keeping things convenient. I called it a trap with a label. Uncle Walter told me to get the house covered. He said cameras in common areas are legal. He said light and time are friends. I ordered 2 small cameras and hid them in a plant and in the corner of the bookcase. I set motion alerts to my phone. The first clip arrived at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Patricia at the table with Dad's bottles. She moved pills from one to another like a shell game. She tapped the counter and smiled to herself. I saved the clip to 3 places. I needed Dad on record when he was clear. I waited for a morning after Patricia claimed she had an errand. By noon, the fog had lifted. We sat at the dining table with the good light. I hit record on my phone. I asked him what he wanted if he needed more help later. He said home first. He said no big changes without me and Uncle Walter in the room. He said my mother loved this house and that he wanted to honor that love. He signed a simple letter in his own hand. I cried in the kitchen where he could not see me. I called Michael and told him it was time to formalize. He asked for dates, and I had them. He asked for witnesses, and Uncle Walter had 2 former colleagues ready. We met at a neutral office on a day Patricia went to a nursing conference. Michael prepared a healthcare proxy naming Walter and me together. He wrote a narrow power of attorney that needed both our signatures. He drafted a statement of wishes about the house. Everything was witnessed and notarized. We put the originals in Michael's safe. I slipped copies into Dad's tackle box under the old lures. Patricia never touches that box. She hates the smell. The last piece fell into my lap. Dad asked me to help with his phone. The font was too small. I opened messages and saw a thread with Derek. It was older than Patricia. It was full of talk about properties and opportunities. One line cut through me. Found a widower with a valuable house. Daughter lives there. Could be managed. Patricia's name showed up weeks later. Derek sent her our address. She replied with a winking face, and the words leave the rest to me. People claim coincidence is a plan we missed. This was not coincidence. This was choreography. I told Michael we were done collecting. He said almost. He wanted a doctor to evaluate Dad on a clear day to lock in his baseline. We booked it for the following week. The report said mild impairment only when overtired. It said competent with support. It said confusion not consistent. Anyone who argues that a birthday cancels your rights is selling fear with a bow. We had the log, we had the pills, we had the video, we had the papers. All we needed now was their move, and they were already planning the party. Morning slid in like a clean sheet. I ironed Dad's blue shirt and set the table with Mom's china. Butter and cinnamon hung in the air. The cake waited under a glass dome. Dad asked if the frosting fish had real hooks. I told him no, and he laughed. His eyes were clear, his hands were steady. Patricia drifted through in a red dress and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She told Dad to save his energy. She told me to pace myself. By noon, the photo wall was done. 70 years in a neat river. College cap, wedding kiss, 3 kids under a cottonwood tree. I slid the leather album beside the plates and tucked a chilled bottle of the same champagne my parents served at their wedding into a bucket of ice. I wanted a circle to close tonight. Guests came in little waves. George and Martha with warm bread, Lauren without her kids. She hugged Dad and drifted to Derek. They spoke in soft, fast sentences that did not want witnesses. Then a man with a briefcase stepped in. Patricia introduced him as Frank. He shook her hand first. He shook Dad's hand second. He called me Amanda like we were old friends. The folder under his arm carried the logo from the brochure I found under the bread box. We ate and pretended to relax. I served beef Wellington and watched Dad's face. He told a story about a bridge that took 10 years to finish. He forgot the county once and found it again a minute later. My chest loosened. Then Patricia poured him her special tea. 20 minutes later, his voice thinned, and his gaze drifted to a corner of the room that had no name. The timeline matched my notes. After dinner, I opened the album. Dad tapped each picture like a prayer bead. He said Mom's name. He told the Yellowstone story and made the same bear joke. Derek checked his watch. Frank stacked papers by the cake as if dessert could share a plate with the listing. Lauren kept glancing at me and then at Derek. The air had an edge. We lit the candles. We sang. Dad closed his eyes and made a wish. The room went quiet. Derek tapped his glass. The sound rang like a bell. To a new chapter. He spoke about safety and dignity and leadership. He said families must act before crisis. He said independence can become a liability after a certain birthday. He lifted a document and smiled at me. Power of attorney, Oakwood Terraces, move in next week, house listed tomorrow. Patricia added her line for the crowd. At his age, control should rest with the capable ones. She said it with sugar. It tasted like rot. George and Martha went still. Dad tried to read the page, and the letters slipped on him. Frank opened his briefcase and fanned glossy comps where the cake should have gone. He talked about market heat and timelines. He said delay costs dignity. I did not argue. I walked into the hall and pressed one button. Michael and I had agreed on one word. Now. I sent it and felt the weight shift. I went back and stood behind Dad's chair. Derek raised his glass like the sale had already closed. Patricia smoothed her dress like a flag. Tires crunched on gravel outside. 2 cars. Slow and steady, the house held its breath. The next minutes would not be polite. They would be exact. The tires stopped. The bell rang. I stood behind Dad's chair and said nothing. Derek kept smiling. Patricia adjusted her dress. Michael walked in first. Uncle Walter came next. Behind them, Dr. Kapor. Derek clicked his tongue. We are in the middle of something, Amanda. Maybe bring coffee while the adults finish the paperwork. The paperwork stops now, I said. Michael nodded. He set a folder on the table. This is a healthcare proxy executed when Harold was clear. Decision makers are Walter and Amanda together. Here is a limited power of attorney that requires both of them. And here is Harold's written wish to remain in his home with in-home care. Patricia laughed. Cute. But real life is messier than your little binder. At his age, he should not be steering the ship. 70 is not a captain's license. It is a warning label. Dad looked at her like she had spoken a foreign word. I built bridges at 70, he said. I can still choose where I sleep. Derek held up his page. Power of attorney signed 3 weeks ago. New beats old. That is how law works. Michael did not raise his voice. Not when signatures were taken under the influence of unprescribed sedatives. Not when they are revoked by a later, properly witnessed document. I tapped my phone. The TV filled with Patricia at the kitchen table, moving pills like a shell game. The next image was a pharmacy report naming a sedative and a date. Dr. Kapor stepped forward. With Harold's consent, I will draw blood now to test for drugs not on his chart. This is harassment, Patricia snapped. Harold, tell them I care for you. Dad's voice shook but held. What is in the tea you serve at night? She did not answer. Derek rolled his eyes. Enough theater. Amanda has been playing nurse, and she is out of her depth. Then I opened the messages. Derek's number, Patricia's number. Dates from years before the clinic. Found a widower with a valuable house. Daughter there. Could be managed. Get me an introduction. I will handle the rest. Lauren took the phone and read twice. She looked at Derek like he was a stranger. Frank cleared his throat. I was told all parties had consented. If that is not the case, I am out. He edged toward the door. Walter said, sensible. Also, Patricia, the prenup excludes any claim to this house. Patricia turned on me. You are jealous and controlling. You want your father stuck here so you can feel needed? Michael stayed steady. Adult Protective Services and the district attorney will be interested in this pattern. He opened another folder. Bank statements. $40,000 in transfers to an entity Derek owns. Dad stared at the numbers, then at his son. Derek's smile cracked. Management fees. Standard practice. Michael shook his head. 4 times the going rate, billed during periods of documented impairment. That is exploitation. Dr. Kapor finished the draw and labeled the vials. Results tomorrow. Based on my prior exam, Harold is competent when properly medicated. Patricia's face drained. She started for the stairs. Walter's voice cut the room. Do not remove anything from this house. Michael added, an emergency protective order has been filed. A knock sounded. A deputy stood at the door with papers. Derek's jaw tightened. This is not over. I put a hand on Dad's shoulder. You are right, I said. It is not. It is finally beginning. The deputy handed Derek the protective order and left copies on the table. Frank slipped out with a nod. Patricia stood halfway up the stairs, the smile gone. The deputy said she could take personal items only, no papers and no medications, and only with an escort. She hissed, grabbed her purse, and left. The door clicked behind the last of her perfume. Lauren stayed. She looked at Dad, then at the pill video on the TV. Her eyes filled and cleared. I am sorry, she said. I wanted to believe Derek. I wanted to believe a facility was love. I said love is not outsourcing. Love is work with a face. She nodded and held Dad's hand. The refrigerator hummed. I breathed, slow. Michael moved fast. He called the bank and put me on with the fraud team. They froze online access and flagged transfers. First twist, a pending wire for tonight at 9, $10,000 to an account tied to Derek's firm. The bank traced the request to a device that logged in from Patricia's sister's house. The hold triggered by the order caught it in time. Derek stood very still. Second twist, an email from Frank before he reached his car. Subject, withdrawn and apology. He attached Derek's messages, pushing a done deal listing for tonight. Frank wrote he would cooperate fully. I saved the files to 3 places and forwarded them to Michael. At 8 the next morning, Dr. Kapor called. The blood panel shows unprescribed sedatives and an antipsychotic, levels consistent with chronic dosing. He would file his report and notify the primary doctor and APS. By noon, APS called. A caseworker scheduled in-home interviews for Dad and for me, with Lauren as a witness. Walter would attend, Michael too. Derek texted 3 times. We are family. We can fix this. You are going to ruin my career. I set the phone down and made soup for Dad. When I looked again, a 4th message waited. You forced my hand. You will regret this. I changed the locks that afternoon. Walter passed me screws on the porch like a scrub nurse. Lauren boxed Patricia's cosmetics and said she would drop them at the police desk. Dad watched from the doorway and smiled like a man who recognizes his own house again. Michael filed through dinner. A petition to freeze remaining accounts. A motion to compel production of all communications between Derek and Patricia. A notice to the nursing board about medication tampering. Tomorrow, we would ask the court for a temporary guardian ad litem to confirm that keeping Dad at home with supports met his stated wishes. He said we were ahead. That night, I checked the cameras. Empty rooms, quiet hallways. The kitchen clock ticked like a metronome. I pulled the tackle box from the closet and touched the copies we had hidden there. The paper felt like a railing on a high bridge. Lauren sat across from me with a legal pad. I want to help, she said. Start with Tuesdays, I said. Pharmacy run, laundry, cards after dinner. She wrote it down like homework she was willing to do. We ate soup and leftover cake. The candles from last night lay in a dish like small bones. Dad took my hand. "You kept the bridge from falling," he said. "We are not done," I told him. He squeezed my fingers. "Then let us finish it right." Winter broke like ice, loosening grip on a lake. Dad started waking before me. He brewed coffee and set out 2 mugs. He shuffled the cards and waited at the table like before. Off the sedatives, his voice had weight. The fog visited on long afternoons, but it no longer ruled the day. With Walter nearby and Lauren on a schedule, the house felt staffed by love instead of fear. Court moved faster than I expected. The judge read Dr. Kapoor's report. He watched video of pills changing hands. He skimmed texts and bank transfers. He granted the annulment on fraud. He entered a protective order on the house. He referred Patricia for investigation. He set a hearing date for Derek's financial exploitation case. We walked out holding each other's coats. We did not cheer. We exhaled. I hired Mrs. Rodriguez for 3 mornings a week. She sings when she cooks. She speaks Spanish with Dad while he practices greetings he learned on job sites decades ago. I took a remote role with a firm that sells software to hospitals. I write copy between blood pressure checks and walks to the mailbox. It is not the title I had. It is the life I chose. Lauren brings her kids twice a month. They color at the coffee table and ask for grandpa stories. Dad tells the one about the engineer who measured everything except his heart and still got the bridge right. We laugh every time. Walter sits in the armchair and pretends not to nap. The house sounds like itself again. We kept one promise for ourselves. We flew to Lake Tahoe on a clear morning. We stood where Dad knelt to propose to Mom. The water threw light at the sky. We did not say much. He slipped his hand into mine and said, "Your mother believed houses had souls. I think she was half right. People give houses their souls." We gave this one back its name. I wish I could tell you Derek apologized. He did not. He sent email that said I was dramatic and ungrateful. Then he went quiet. Maybe time will sand the edges. Maybe not. I learned forgiveness is not a door you hold open while someone robs you. Forgiveness is a boundary with grace built in. Here is what I know now. Trust your notes. Write dates. Keep copies. Ask the question even when the room wants you to be polite. Age does not cancel personhood. Love is paperwork and soup and showing up. Family is who protects your dignity when you cannot. If this story reached you, tell me where you are watching from in the comments. Share a time you stood up for someone you love. Hit like so this story finds the next person who needs it. Subscribe if you believe 70 is not an expiration date. Thank you for listening. We will be here, on the porch, keeping the bridge steady.